Well, I'm back again with my tutorial videos. I've been asked to paint a commission of a coastal subject, the fishing boats and general boats in looking out from Orford Quay. And unlike me, rarely do I use masking fluid, but you may just be able to see a discoloration of the paper in the forms of the boats and the distance, and that is the masking fluid. I will do a tutorial on applying masking fluid very shortly, but just wanted to show you about painted commissions, which can be difficult, but all you can do is give your inspiration to the scene. So I've been down, made some sketches, made a pencil sketch, 1-2 photographs, got a general idea of the client's needs. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to, as you can see, I'm using a large brush, inch and a quarter, inch and a half brush, and I'm applying plenty of water. The reason why I have masked is because I want to get the sky, the background, the water all in one complete wash. Then I can allow that to completely dry before I then overpaint with my tinting the boat. And I will show you what I mean by masking fluid. Those of you that are familiar with using masking fluid would know what that's all about. It's something that I rarely do, but in this instance, as far as I was concerned, there was no other option. And notice how these are a very large brush, a soft brush, so I don't remove any of the masking fluid, because it will remove if you're not careful. With the lights on, it is very warm, so notice I'm spreading the water very evenly, and I'm spreading a lot. This is my second layer of water, and I'm allowing that to soak in completely, because that's the key to painting wet on wet. In other words, when the paper's wet, obviously your paint is wet. The other one is wet on the dry, of course, but in this instance it's wet on wet. If I look at it, I can see whether the water is soaking in. While it's shining quite a lot, then it means the water is on the surface of the paper. Once it starts to go matte, you need to work very quickly, but once it starts to go matte, you can then drop your colour in. And I'm even, this is unusual for me, but I'm really damping the paper, and I'm making certain that it's completely damped all over. It really is quite a thing that needs to be done, because if you don't, you end up, it dries too quickly and you lose the effect you're looking for. Now I know roughly the sky that I'm going to put in. It's quite an interesting sky. I want to put plenty of interest, because in this sort of subject, interest in the sky is so important. And I can only give an impression of what I think the sky should look like. Now I'm going to start with not actually putting any sun in, and in actual fact the light, it will be coming from the right hand side, but I need a glow of something within the sky itself. So I'm going cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson. They are the two colours. A bit more crimson than cadmium, and I'm going to stroke that in there. A little bit in the lower part as well, just so as we get that. Going in now with a bit more yellow, because I need to show a bit of light. And with that, I'm stroking that into the water as well. So I'm painting the whole picture, really, if you like to see it that way. It's so important that you think about when it's water. You need to think about the space in the water, the colour. So I'm just stroking that nice warm colour in. We should need a bit more of that warm colour in the sky somewhere. There you go. Lovely. That's perfect. Good. Okay, now I'm looking at the clouds. Now this is interesting. I'm moving over to my squirrel mop brush that points well, and the colour for the cloud work. Well, I've got to use the red definitely. So I'm using the alizarin and ultramarine. Quite a deep blue, but I do need that at this stage to give me the slightly lighter blues. Let's go a little bit bluer with that, because I do feel some of too purple too early. But it's always interesting to paint in. There you go. Let's try and drop that across the sky. And also in the lower area of the sky. It's not as deep in colour, but and the clouds obviously appear smaller in the distance, so make certain that you try and achieve that. A little bit along the horizon, particularly that side and possibly that side. Allow that to soak in. Obviously this will need to go in the water as well, so we pull that across and allow that. The water is going to be much darker than the sky, so we can, but we do need a little bit of that freshness in there. Don't overpaint all of it. Let's paint the water in like that, keeping painting across the. Right, now the somewhat darker colour, so crimson, blue. This means a denser colour, stronger colour. Don't go too dark with this, you know, but a little bit of strength. And I'm going to put a touch of cadmium in there. Now, I know you probably think it turns yellow, but if you've got enough green, but if you've got enough red in there, then it doesn't. It gives a nice mellow feel to these clouds. There's a bit of blue. There you go. Now, this is where the dominant cloud is. It's where the real strong cloud is. A bit more blue. Nice bluey shape of a cloud. There you go. And I know it looks extremely dark, and you're probably saying, "Ooh, that's too much. He's obviously overdone that." Well, I hope you're not right, because it would mean that that I would find a lot of problems pulling this back. It wasn't right. There's another little area there. Another little area there, just stroking that across into the distance. It's always a fine dividing line as to how much you actually lay in and where you lay it in as well. You know, I mean, it's not easy. You know, it's not one of those things that's an exact science. If I could say to you, well, it's got to be here and it's got to be there and it'll be perfect, well, that'd be brilliant, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. Not in the world of watercolour painting, and in the water as well. There you go. Good. Right, now I'm going to introduce a bit of green now, because that water will have a tint of a greeny colour. Not too much, but just sort of greeny blue. It mustn't be too pinky blue. And that will run across the foreground and into the colour you've just laid in. There you go, just got a tint of green with that. And ultramarine, and I'm going to use the crimson, but this time I'm going to use a little raw sienna, and this will really give the mix a bit of body. In other words, it will give it a more mellow grey effect, more bluey grey, which is somewhat thundery. There you go, look at that. See how that raw sienna has strengthened that colour? And that needs to be there just to give us a thundery, not a thundery, but a very sort of a feel of clouds in the distance, you know, in the top part of the sky, perhaps a little there, running in, maybe a little there, but certainly on the horizon there. You've got to go this strength, because I can assure you that when it dries, just bring a cloud, these are very small clouds in the distance, one or two little clouds just sweeping across the sky at that point. Don't overdo this when you paint these images of clouds. Mustn't overdo it, but allow that. Now all I'm doing is adding a yellow to the mix and painting that over some of the water, because this will be somewhat darker. Only in places. Don't want to remove too much of that light in the foreground, but there you go. And that will now need to be left to dry. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to wipe around the edges to make certain that it doesn't bleed in. Okay, that's the first stage. I'll come back to you when it's complete. Right, well, it's completely dry. The paper is completely dry. Still a little bit of cockering in the paper, but that will gradually dry out completely. But the surface basically has been drying now for about an hour, and now I can get on and start removing the masking fluid. And all you do, you just simply rub at the paper like that. Make certain that your fingers are clean, because if you get anything like a piece of grease on the paper, you do tend to lose the effect, and the problem starts is when you come to overpaint. You get it doesn't take to the paper because of the grease on the paper, but basically you begin to see the forms that you overpainted with the masking fluid stand out in white paper, and these then need to be tinted. That's the basic thing about masking fluid. What you touch with the masking fluid that's on the brush, that is exactly the shape that you get. So you've just got to watch really that you don't end up with the wrong shapes. But I think that's pretty much sums it up really. It's pretty good. I think you can see the shape of the boats, and now what we've got to do is start thinking about where we go from here really. We do have obviously our distance, so I'm going to paint the distance in next. That is purely the far distance, which is always a good place to start really. And I'm going to use a brush that points not too large, and I'm going to paint in, it's like I suppose like a beach area, and that to me will just be raw sienna. Don't want to be too brilliant, so not a strong yellow, and plenty of water. and this side we have some dark, but of course we can overpaint that later on. So let's get in this, I don't know whether we might have an orangey glow as well due to the sky, so let's put in a little bit into that raw sienna, a little bit of the crimson, just to pick up an orangey tint. There we go. Just watch the boats. They're presumably white, or will be white. Okay, and just weaken that a little as we go away, a little bit stronger there, but overall fairly weak with that colour, and just sweep that across. So that's the distance beach area, which stands out very nice against that dark sky. Picks up the yellowing and a little bit of the red that I'll put in there, so that marries well. The next area really is to, I'd like to perhaps get in, there's a bit of land coming in on the right hand side. It's up to see the drawing now, but I think I'll finish there. So that bit of land, it's got a bit of green to it, but also a bit of brown. So I'm going to use the raw sienna again, a little bit of cadmium this time gone in with the blue, ultramarine, to get a greeny touch. And I'm not actually left this, not actually masked this, so this, because this is definitely going to be darker, so that then runs across, that finishes about there. So it's just as if that's more or less in shadow really, and it finishes more or less at quite a drop like that. Then we start using, I'm going to put burnt umber with ultramarine, because I want the, looking for like a dark mud colour, and that'll be precisely along that line there while it's still damp, because that will give us a good feeling of land, like that. Go. And then a little bit of crimson, because crimson is dominating the sky, so let's put a little bit of that in there. There you go. There you go. And a little bit of yellow, raw sienna, good variation, and that's picked up that very, very well. Okay. Now there is a little bit of land in the distance there, and this has got to be quite blue and red, so ultramarine with a little bit of crimson in there. Quite blue this will be, because it's distant. Don't want to be too powerful. It's just a small piece of land. We're looking towards Shingle Street really, so there is just a little bit of land there. Actually, I'm cutting that across that that mast, so I'm actually going to pull that across like that. There you go. Just tapers away like that. So that small piece of land, and there is some more dark areas here. Now that's dry, I can put that in, put these dark areas in. It's quite a dark, muddy sort of green really, but let's see what we can get with this colour. A little bit of everything gone in there to give it a muddy, quite dark. So we need enough blue and certainly enough blue in there, and enough red really to give us sort of an earthy colour, and the yellow will tone it back, make it quite earthy. It's alright as long as it's still quite, wherever the masts are, we've got to leave. So I was interested to, you do mask things, but on the other hand you still need a little bit of what I'd class as brush, what I class as brush skills really, where you actually need to pick around objects. And this is a little bit weaker now as I go away into the distance. And there we go, leave some gaps where the masks are. Never be afraid to improve on what you see out there. And that then just tapers away into the distance. Could carry that line through a little bit as well. Just use the point of the brush then, just to pick up one or two little edges along the beach there. And this goes up a little higher than that. So quite a high area there. The distance, but it tapers away very quickly. Those of you that live in the area would know exactly what I'm trying to depict along that skyline there. Okay, so that's that. It's a good start, you know, things are working out quite well. Next area will be getting some colour on the boats really, and you've got to decide, you know, what boats we had and what was, I mean, for instance, this one I do know had cobalt blue on the sails, and there was a little bit of sail work at that point there, and there was also some sails that were running across the boom there, which I suppose I would do like that, and down to the laying just on the back there. So it's all part of where they've taken the sails down. This one was the same, funny enough. There's a couple of boats in that obviously the similar features, and always nice to have some blue in there, and then of course some red, and good, makes good composition. We've got another boat, one or two in the distance. We won't be doing too much to those at this stage. We've just got a little bit of sort of browny colour for the lining, these decorative lines along the boats, and that one's the same there like that. And a little bit of red now, reddy orangey colour for the line along the water line. It's also quite important that we get that in correctly. There we go, they begin to stand out now. I think you should be able to see that, how we're tinting the white paper that we had, which is always a good thing to do. It really brings out the strength of the colour. Not worrying about shadow at this point. Maybe some dull reds now in the distance, perhaps a little bit on that boat there, perhaps a little bit there. I'm not depicting anything too much in the distance, that's an impression. Well, it is all over really, but that's the main thing. That boat is white. We'll do the buoys in a minute, the mooring buoys. So that boat is white. That is black. So, well, very dark. So let's get in with this dark colour. We'll always try and put a bit of that red with it as well, because that will give us that, you know, the sky obviously has a feeling for the on the whole. It has a big bearing on the complete thing. So we do need to make certain that we paint in everything associated with the like the boats, that they actually reflect the sky at some point, which they always will do. Now this is very much a dark colour, darker than the water actually. but the reason why I've painted it in masking fluid, because there was a little bit of signage there, or a name plate of some sort, and a little bit of line there that may catch the light. That side probably wouldn't, but it may do. But anyway, it's painted over now. And quite a long boat, not too deep. You know, you've got to pick up the characters of these old boats. If you know, if you're a bit like me, you're not that familiar with boats, then you know, observation is quite important, so that's pretty much it. We can give it a bit more depth at some point. While we have, no, we'll leave that. We'll just leave that. Allow that to dry. Now we'll look at the red one. That's a red. But imagine as a boat that goes out to help the sailing boats. I don't know, but now that is quite an intense red. Now I've not got that colour, but I'm trying to mix as near as I can to it, and it's an orangey red. So there again, crimson with a little bit of lemon, cadmium lemon in there, and got a bit of strength to it. It has got a shadow at the front, but let's just produce this. We're not worried about shadow work at this moment in time. We just do the main boat first. This is not my normal style. Normally I'm quite fresh and loose, but I feel when you paint these sort of subjects, you know, it's vital that you try and pick up a bit of neatness to the whole thing, because it is quite a nice subject, and it does need a bit of attention. It's not as neat as it really looks, but okay, so we're getting on with the boats, and as you can see, I've put in some small touches to the distant boats. Now I'm working on the foreground boat, and I've got some dark blue, ultramarine, bit of brown in there, just to darken the blue off, but it is quite blue. There's a line that runs from bow to stern, really, so this is a must that I'll get this in a clean fashion, which sometimes is not always easy. There you go, that's that. Oh, it goes round the bow as well, the main beam round the front. That's good. The next thing I do is to paint in, there's a nice red line around the water's edge, and that needs to be put in fairly punchy with quite a bit of colour, and it tapers. You know, you've got to watch the shape of these objects, these features of boats, because if you don't get them right, you're going to lose the correct features. And I think I've just about got that right. So that's looking pretty good. And actually runs a little bit further than that. You can actually see it. Whoops, more or less along the water line. It gradually dies out as it goes out to the back. That's better. A little bit more like it. We've obviously got reflections put in, so that will marry together very, very nicely. One or two darker little touches now, that like ropes. Well, we've got a little bit of rope work that hold the buoys on. They're actual fenders, actually, which those boating people out there that I know some of you are will pull me up on that one, because they are fenders when the boat comes alongside on the quay. Now a few more darker little touches. There's some little things going on at the back there, objects there and there. Not quite sure what they are, but we're not concerned. Ropes, bits and bobs, a bit of colour perhaps required as well in those. I want to leave that white rim around the edge of the boat, always good to give the impression of sunlight. Now I'm going to start, and the mooring rope onto the buoy, that must go in. It is white, so that's why I've masked it, but going to put in the shadow of that, that's all. Now there's quite a bit to do, but it's all taking shape. You can begin to see how the boats stand out against the darkest water, which is what I'm trying to balance. You know, we've got the darker water, we need the boats to stand out away from the water line, you know, so that there's shape there. And I'll put in quite a bit of work into these boats, just little touches. It's very suggestive. It doesn't, you know, you don't want detail. Once you start detail, you've really got quite a bit of trouble. Now, there is a black. Now, I didn't mask this, which I suppose I should have done, but I'm going to get myself out of trouble because there's a number to this boat, and it's on a black background, so it's white against black. So what I'm going to do at the end, I'm going to use something that I rarely do. I'm going to use white acrylic just to paint in the number. I'd prefer to have done it with the masking fluid, but there you go. That's one thing that I left out. But as I say, you know, these things happen, and it's not the end of the world. You know, there's no need to get too worked up about anything like that. Good. So that's that. Now I'm going to start looking at shadows. Now it's vital that we get shadow work in the correct area and with the correct colour. And I'm going to use Prussian blue and of course the crimson and a bit of cobalt blue as well, ultramarine blue as well. Now to start off with, don't be too strong with this. And where will we set? Well, I've done a lot to the boats in the background, but where you may see it is a little. I've got to feel the light more coming from the left, so I'm just putting that onto there. That's a little on the heavy side, so let's just lift that. There we are. See where it's just lifted that. May very well cast a bit there. Not sure whether there's windows there, but I would imagine there is a window there of some sort. Quite a large window there. So that's gone in. A little bit of shadow work on the base of that there, and down the left hand side of the mast. It's not a mast, it's just something that like a radar affair. You're right, so there's quite a lot going on the top of that boat, and a little bit on the back here as well. So, you know, we need to make certain that we pick up little features that without getting fussy. Now, I'm saying that because it is quite important that you remember this when you come to paint, because it's quite difficult to do this sort of work and not over paint, you know, overwork it. Just a little bit of shadow down the mast, but nothing greatly. Don't want to overdo that. Once you take away the white paper, you've lost that lovely strength. Right, now this time I'm going to start on, there's just another area here. This has a shadow, So it's like a slanting area at the front of that boat there, maybe a little bit of shadow work there, a little bit of shadow work under. Sometimes they have a rim. Just begin to get that to show there. So that's always important. Now we're starting with this one in the foreground, trying to keep the shadows fairly light. Don't put them in too dark, because if I do, I don't really want to be as dark as the water, and that's very similar to the watercolour, so I've got to be a bit careful with that. Just lift that away a touch, just to give it a hint, just a tint of colour, and there will be little tints of colour in the glazing as well, like that. That's good. There you go. What are we looking at now? Right, there, there. It's just the shadow areas really that I'm painting. There you go, that's that support that pulls in the nets at the back. There is a line too that stretches up, supports that on the back there. One or two little bits and pieces like that, a little bit of rigging there, a bit of netting, but we're not going to get into something big there. But we're not going to get into all of that fussy detail. And I'm just lining around the windows, trying to give those they have a rounded shape, but not too concerned about that. And of course we'd see the inside of that one there, and the inside of that one there. And that'd be the corner of the cabin. Yeah, it's all looking pretty good. Now we would see a shadow there, but then of course that would then be in shadow right the way through, so that's nice. Now the next thing, we need a bit more Prussian with this, because that's the colour of the boat itself, and I'm going to try and sweep that shadow colour down across the boat like that, sweeping it through along the waterline like that. Now just to give it a bit of interest, we've got a secondary shadow colour to come on from the buoys, and this will be dark red. That'll be dark red, so it's not blue. So I'm talking to myself. Oh right, yes, this is where we'll also have shadow. Quite a nice bit of shadow there. Nice bit of shadow running down there. A bit on the underside of that, a bit to the right of that. They'll just so it all tints up and stands out against that nice darker sea background. To the darker touches in this area here, a little bit darker down there, a bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. That's what they say. My old mate Ian King used to say that, a little bit here, a little bit there. Before you know it, if you're not careful, you put a little bit too many places, which can be a disaster. Okay, so that's that. And the next area will be the buoys. Okay, so let's use a light red for the shadow. Don't know why I'm using light red, but we'll see if it works. It's a stronger red because they are in shadow there, like that. These are in shadow there, like that, there, like that. Yeah, that looks about the shadow colour for those. And we've got the green there again, so we'll go for the dark green for the shadow colour on these boys, which is one there, more in, this one's a little bit lighter, that one as well, that's red, which we'll leave that unpainted. Further away you go, the least detail you need. So it's always important to understand that. Okay, well, we're getting to the point where I'm going to start looking at putting in some reflections in the water. Right, well, this is the final stage. It's a matter of attending to the water, really. And some areas of the water will show a reflection lighter. Some areas will show a reflection darker. This boat is white, so that will probably show a lighter reflection. That is an area where we've got dark, where we'll have a darker reflection, and then we'll probably have a darker red reflection on that. This will definitely be dark. This could very well be lighter with some tints of blue in it. So, you know, we're going to try and play with these shadows and see where we get, how far we get. I'm going to start off with a flat brush, and I'm dampening the flat brush, and then I'm removing a little of the paint, because what I want is the brush to wet the paper and then lift the paint off. See where I'm lifting the paint away? So it's damped the paper, and then all of a sudden I'm just lifting the paint away. And I don't want it too clearly defined, because it's not that sort of day really. It's a little bit darker, so it just needs a bit more lifting. So basically, see the way I've got that reflection, and then all of a sudden we have a reflection for the sail. We'll only see the top part of the sail, like that. So that is how you produce these sort of reflections, really, when you're on darker water. This one's light as well, so I'm going to use the same method on that, lifting the colour away, like that, with a damp brush, and then pulling in the mast. This is going to be the same here. I don't want to go any wider than the boat itself, so to use the side of that brush. Could do with the point really of another brush, but there you go. Let's just see if this one will do it. Yeah, that's sufficient. I'm not looking. It's just a little bit of a small mast there that may be useful. I'm not looking for anything too specific, because it's very much an impression, and that one's going to be darker. This is going to have varying tones really. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift off to start with. So the brush, I've just damped the paper, now I'm lifting off the colour, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift off in strips. In other words, so it's not too, it's not a solid area. So now I'm going to leave a gap, and I'm going to lift off a little bit more. Take it out, don't take it out too far beyond the extremes of the boat. Then there's a nice light area there. I'm not going to pull any colour into that at this stage. So I'm lifting off there again, and that's that. Just shows a bit of rippling in the water. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And obviously we do have a little reflection here from the metal areas at the back. Just pull that out just a little bit further, soften that a little bit more. There we go. And yeah, the the front of that boat will actually come down at that angle. So we've got to make certain we get that right. There we go. And of course the cabin. You may see the top of the cabin, and that's white. So we're going to have to lift that off as well. There we go. And with that, I'm just going to dab the colour away just so we can get a clearer light colour. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Now that's the light. Now to apply the dark, just use a brush at points and some dark. I'm looking for a greeny purpley colour, so I'm going to use ultramarine and burnt, ultramarine and rose madder, or sorry, alizarin crimson. But I'm also going to put in a little bit of yellow, just to give me a grey sort of colour. Let's just try it on this one, and we'll sweep it over like that, and it will be blurred, so we just damp it. Now we finish at that angle, and we just damp the colour like that. So that gives, there again, as I say, it's a dark colour. So some of these reflections, because the boat is dark, the reflection will be dark. We will have a dark reflection in the shadow there. So I'm just reflecting that shadow at that angle, which is the reflection. There is just a small dark reflection there. It's just not too dark in the distance. Oh, and a little dark reflection just where we can see that area there. Just shows where the boat sits in the water, really, you know. Just a little bit darker, that's it. And let's just pick up a little bit of reflection from these in the water. Don't want to overdo that. And of course there will be, I'm going to use the point of the brush on this to pick up the reflection of the mast. It may, just the point of the brush just lifting off, should be able to see that. It's best to do it with a flat, really, because it gets a bit wide, to be honest with you. But that's a good impression of it. And then, right, now we're going to reflect this, and I'm just going to use a dark red. And I'm actually going to use a totally different red. The red I'm using is Indian red, right? Because as a wash of colour with the blue, I think we'll end up with the right colour as the reflection. There we are. Look at that. And that then just wants spreading and misting with a damp brush. Notice how I use a damp brush and a dry brush to get these reflections. And it becomes like water-like because of the reflections we're painting in. Now, the boat will have a reflection of the small reflection of the area of red. There will be a reflection of the underneath of those fenders. Well, let those dry. Just show where they attach to the side of the boat. It's just an impression of them. You know, it's so much an impressionist thing. It's far from the actual image themselves. There we are. Just let them blur away, and now the reflection of the green buoys. So consequently, we're going to put in. Let's just lift off a bit of colour for those because they are quite light. There you go. Mop away a bit of colour, and then just put a green-blue reflection in. That's all we need. Just a green-blue reflection. Just purely like that. That one's not too dark, and that one shouldn't be too dark, but it's, yeah, I may need to just lift that just a touch. It's a little strong. All very delicate, but you do need to be a bit careful in places when you're looking at this sort of work. And also the boys sit in the ground, into the water. Just put a bit of shadow on the underside of those as well. So you've got to marry them into the water. Notice the way I'm just delicately tinting that. And of course the red, that boy there is actually mooring boy. It's actually, I'm going to use that Indian red again, and it's pretty straight, and then just lightly damp and pull that paint in a rounded sort of fashion. As I say, you've got to remember it does sit in the water. Go, and all of a sudden you've got yourself a reflection, maybe a little bit of reflection of the rope, or the mooring rope that's in the water, and that's going to reflect slightly darker because it's the shadow underneath the shadow side. We're going to have a bit of reflection for the front of the boat there, and then I'm going to put a green on that, which is a bluey green. The boat is actually bluey green, so that's what I'm going to put in. It's Prussian blue with a little bit of yellow in there. The raw sienna should give us that sort of bluey green, which is typically what I think we'd see in the reflection at that point. So we'll sweep that across like that. There we go. Look at that. See the way that blurs that into looking just like the side of the boat. Maybe a bit high with that, so we'll just blend that down a bit. There we go. It really is as simple as that to achieve that water effect. And then of course we have that there like that, that there, and one other one there, and there's something going on at the back of the boat and that sort of thing. We just got to give an impression of what we can see. But yeah, now all we need to do now is to make certain we get a water line. In other words, what I mean by water line, it always gets a little darker where the boat meets the water, and it's just a rippling of the water really along the edge there. See where the boat now sits into the water. It really is vital that you observe these things when you come to produce these sort of paintings. And just a little bit there where that one sits, a little bit there where that one sits. You can just blend the backs of the boats and you can get the shape then. This one will be quite dark because that's quite dark. Just shape up the front of the bow of that boat so as it looks a little darker. Oh, and that's nice, it's almost there, but that's just a touch on that. And what I'm doing with the point of the brush, I'm putting the masks in, although they're light, I'm putting them in dark. Just to give that boat-like impression really. And then we go in with dark bluey green again for the land. Now this is there again dark. It's a dark reflection in the water, and then we damp the paper and blend it in. So we're not looking for hard edges, we're looking for soft edges here. So some of the reflections are dark and some are light, and I may just put a little bit of reflection along that edge there, but I'm not going to go too much with that because I don't think it needs it. It's far better to just allow that to have sunlight on it, really, and far better, I think, to leave it fairly simply. We could, and this is where we need to be very, very careful, but with a flat brush, I'm now going to put a weak wash of blue-green there again. It's Prussian blue, because that's a green to start with. Okay, well there is the finished painting, and to me it's come off pretty much as I expected. You can see that there is quite a lot of work in the sky, a nice bit of light. The boat in the foreground stands out nicely, and overall it's been quite successful, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I will put another one very shortly, another demonstration on actually how to apply and how to use masking fluid, but I needed to use that on that particular subject. Stay tuned to my channel.